The Prepper Podcast, episode 24.
You've got to know whether or not their president's a crook.
The American people would never vote for socialism. He said, under the name of liberalism, the American people will adopt every fragment of the socialist program.
Prepper Podcast is an up-to-date survival podcast based on military, wilderness, and modern-day survival and may be found at theprepperpodcast.com. I am Ken Jensen, and this is the podcast about everything survival. My goal is to teach you strategies on self-reliance and develop survival skills and critical thinking in everyone, resulting in a more resilient and more enjoyable life. This is episode 24, and today I will discuss Hookah Culture and how you can place it in your own backyard. The show notes for today's podcast may be found at theprepperpodcast.com/024. Now let's go into the housekeeping a little bit. I have made my calendar available for consulting at theprepperpodcast.com/calendar. I want you to pay attention to the price. I do not make it easy. I do not make it cheap for my time. I have it currently at $150 an hour for survival consultation. Now, I will make myself available quite often for less than that, but it will be when I have the whenever I can do that and make it available cheaper, and I will make myself available to more people. That's how it's going to work. So, because I'm so busy, I wanted to make myself available to people for one-on-one counseling, but it's going to have a pretty good price tag on it at $150 an hour. I've been tweaking this budget, the budget-based survival goals. I'm tweaking it. I haven't released it on beta yet, but I will be releasing it soon enough, and it's just because I've been putting a lot of hours into trying to get this thing right. So before the beta testers get it, I'm just trying to make as many additions to it as possible. Now, beta testers, remember, you have to agree to follow it, and you have to agree to give me a review, or else you cannot do the beta testing. All right, and it will be a written or a spoken review. I mean, We'll figure that out later, but I need a review on it, and I need you guys to actually follow it so that we know where the problems are in this budget. Now, this budget is at least as good as Dave Ramsey's budget, and this budget is better than most other budgets. The goals, the survival goals in this, are better than any, I mean it, it's better than any survival training that I've seen online. You know, the 1-year survival training or whatever, all the webinars and stuff like that. The goals in this, how specific they are, is better than any survival training that I've ever seen that's online and not actually in person. All right, and let's be honest here. I made this where an idiot could get a hold of this budget, follow it to the T, and be prepared. That's the whole point of it. All right, so let me finish some tweaking. There's been so many hours going into this thing that I have very little time on my hands right now because I'm just trying to get all the little bitty details done. All right, with that being said, I'm ready to go into the discussion. So let's do it. I was going to go ahead and tell you guys about Hugelkultur. So let me go ahead and give you just a little bit of background on Hugelkultur, and maybe we can make this a very information-packed episode, and maybe less than an hour. I might be able to get this thing down to about 30 minutes or less. And if I can do that, that'll be great, because today I am doing a podcast marathon. Not really a marathon. It's only 2 podcasts today, but I'm doing this week's podcast and next week's podcast all in the same day, because I'm going to be working 12-hour days, six or 7 days a week over the next 2 weeks, because we have a maintenance outage coming up. So I wanted to go ahead and get all these episodes recorded for you guys, so that I knew that you were going to get one even when I could not record it. So I already know what next week's topic is going to be, but you'll have to listen next week in order to find out, because I'm not going to tell you what it's about. A little hint, it has a little bit something to do with what I'm doing today. Now, for Hugelkultur. Hugelkultur is a word, it's a German word, and it actually means mound culture. You know, like Indian mounds, that kind of thing. Hugelkultur means mound culture. That's really all it is. What it is, it mimics what happens in the forest, okay? All right, think about it in the forest. Let's think about the forest. What happens in the forest? You have a bunch of big trees, and then you have a few small plants on the ground, right? You have ground cover and stuff like that. The trees, they lose their leaves about every year. You know, all the deciduous trees, they lose their leaves. The leaves fall to the ground. They sit there. They decay. They are natural mulch for the ground. The leaves underneath, they decay even more, and they start turning into humus, or they get, the soil gets very rich underneath the top layer of leaves. You move all the leaves back, and you'll see like white fungus layers, and you'll see all kinds of little insects and stuff. So the leaves of the trees and then the insects, the way that they break those leaves down, along with all the trees that die and fall to the ground, all of that creates sorry about that. I hit the mic. It creates extremely fertile soil, and it's very healthy for all the trees that are there. All right, so that's pretty much what it is, and it's a never-ending cycle of feeding from the ground and then converting all the food from the ground into growth, converting all the sun and things like that, using up carbon dioxide, release oxygen. You know, you take all of that stuff, the leaves will fall to the ground, they will make fertile soil, and then the cycle starts back over again. So Hugelkultur mimics this. All right, what that does is it's going to help retain moisture, right? I already said it builds fertility. You get better drainage, believe it or not. You actually get better drainage with Hugelkultur. The water will drain into the ground. The water is not going to stand on the ground as much because of the way that the ground is built. It's actually very fertile. It's very spongy, and it'll suck up the water. All right, we're getting rid. What we can also do with Hugelkultur, another benefit of it, is you can get rid of all your woody trash, all the little dead sticks and things like that fall out of your trees. If you have to cut a tree down and you don't want to put that in your fire pit, which I don't know why you wouldn't want to put a tree in a fire pit, but all the little broken twigs and things like that aren't going to do you any good to throw them into a fire or anything. If you don't need them for kindling or anything, then you can throw these into the ground and just cover it up with dirt. That's essentially what you're doing, is you're just covering up a bunch of sticks with dirt and creating a mound out of it. All right, this is also going to create that fungal culture in the ground that I was talking about, and this fungal culture is going to work with the plants that are currently there. You know, so like as you are gardening and stuff like that, if you have an established Hugelkultur mound, these plants are going to have the best soil, and they're going to have a very good relationship with the fungal culture that's in the ground and with all the insects that come with it. You have more surface area to plant in typical Hugelkultur. All right, with a regular Hugelkultur bed, you have more surface area to plant in the ground, and it's also easier to reach your plants. So those are the benefits and kind of what happens in a Hugelkultur mound. So let's go ahead and talk about it. What is a Hugel bed? And I don't mean that it's just a small mound. It's a really big mound. A Hugel mound is usually 5 to 6 feet tall. A Hugel mound is about as tall as the average person. Now think about that. You have to reach to the top and all the way down to the ground, obviously. Wouldn't you want, if you have to pick your plants, wouldn't you want to be able to reach straight in front of you instead of having to reach all the way down to the ground? So usually a lot of times what they'll do on this, well, you know what? I'll get there here in just a second. The incline on this mound is usually 60 to 70% incline. So if you think about that, that's almost straight up. It's still in a big mound, but it's almost straight up. So 60 to 70% incline and about 5 to 6 feet tall, depending on the person that owns the mound, right? You're going to do it probably about your height. So at this incline and this height, it's going to make picking your stuff a lot easier. Now, think about it, this mound, what I'm talking about, this is typically a permaculture type establishment, but it's usually for a more intensive managed garden, that kind of thing. So something that you're going to come up to quite a bit, and you're not going to just leave it alone to take care of itself. So this mound is at such a steep incline because it'll still retain water. It'll still offer water to plants. It will still offer the plants stability so that the plants can grow up, but it is going to make it very easy for you to pull weeds and to pick, because all you have to do is stand there beside the mound and reach straight out in front of you, and you're not going to have to do a whole lot of bending for most of this mound. You're just going to be right there. And you remember I said it has a lot more surface area. So if you think about it, if you have the ground going up this steep, the amount of surface area to move 1 foot horizontal, then you're going to have a lot more surface area going in the vertical direction. So you have a lot more plants that can be planted in one spot. That's why if you look on like Pinterest and things like that, that you'll be able to see, they have a thing called pallet gardening, and a lot of people will put herb gardens and stuff like that in old pallets. They'll let it start growing out a little bit, and then they'll nail the pallet to their fence. And what that does for them is it allows them to grow a bunch of stuff vertically. Well, Hugelkultur is kind of doing the same thing, okay? So that's the shape of the mound. That's not all of it is, and that's not all that it is, right? So how in the world do you build one? Well, I'm going to go ahead and tell you how to build one, and I would expect you to go ahead and go to my show notes, because I'm going to have a link to a blog post of mine probably, and that blog post can kind of show you more of what it is. And I'll try to include some pictures in the show notes as well so that you guys can understand what I'm talking to. So if you're not driving in your car or something like that and you want to just sit and listen to what I'm saying, then you could sit with my show notes in front of you and you're going to be able to follow along very well. I usually type up the show notes to match what I'm saying. So, you'll be able to follow along, and if I include pictures, usually those pictures will go along with what I'm saying. All right, so let's go ahead and talk about how to build one. The first thing that you're going to want to do if you have a Hugelkultur, if you're trying to build a Hugelkultur mound, is you're going to want to go ahead and get your compost started the year before, okay? You're going to need quite a bit of compost and stuff like that whenever you do your mound, because we'll get into the reason why you need compost in a Hugelkultur mound here in just a few minutes. But the first thing you're going to do when you actually get to the point where you're wanting to create a Hugelkultur bed is you're going to dig a ditch. You're going to dig that ditch. We're talking about a typical Hugelkultur mound, okay? We're going to dig this ditch about 5 to 20 feet long. Okay, so this is anywhere from the height of a typical person up to like 20 feet long. And then the width of it is going to be 3 to 4 foot wide. So, an arm length, if you take both of your arms and you spread them, you stick them both out straight from your sides, horizontal to the ground, that's usually about your height. You take about half of that, and that's about 3 to 4 feet wide, okay? You can do this on or off contour. Now, what does on or off contour mean? I've discussed to you guys what contour was on a map, and it's no different with contour of your land as far as gardening goes. Okay, contour is the line on a map that goes perpendicular to the slope of the land. In other words, if water runs downhill and you take a line and you draw it the direction that water runs straight downhill, and you just make a big X with another line straight across horizontal, perpendicular to that first line, that is your contour line. It is 90 degrees offset from the direction that water goes. That is what a contour line is. And everything on that line is at the same height, is at the same level when it comes to how high it is above sea level. So contour is effectively the shape of the land. Remember, contour lines, everything is exactly the same elevation from sea level on a contour line. Hopefully you guys get it. Hopefully I was good at explaining to you what contour is. Now, after you've dug this ditch, let's say 10 feet long and 4 feet wide or whatever, you go ahead and fill it with wood. Now, hardwoods, they last a lot longer, so if you can spare them, it's good to throw hardwood in there. But some people like to throw softwood in there because softwood doesn't last as long, but it starts breaking down a lot faster. So if you throw it in there, you're going to be fine to throw like a pine tree or something in your Hugelkultur mound. It's not going to hurt a thing. All right, it'll decompose the same as the hardwood will. It'll just decompose faster, and it will do its job faster. But the one thing about the softwood is it will be gone. It will be broken down before the hardwood is completely broken down. So it's not as time released, so to speak. It does let you get rid of the debris that's like in your yard and stuff like that. So this is what I was talking about earlier. You don't just have to put solid pieces of wood in there. You can go ahead and you can fill this hole up with a bunch of twigs and sticks and stuff that you pulled out of your yard or something like that, so you're not wasting things. And if you wanted to clean up around your yard, see, usually the sticks and stuff that fall in the forest, you want to leave in the forest because that is part of the entire dynamic. That is the culture in that forest. But if it's fallen into like a lawn or something like that, then you can go ahead and get rid of it. If you have neighbors that are cleaning up and they're pruning things, then you can get all the hardwood, or you can get all the wood, the woody debris, out from in front of their lawn. Of course, get their permission so you don't look like this weirdo just collecting a bunch of wood. But you can get all this woody debris out of the front. You can take it back to your house and you can throw it into this hole in the ground. So, excuse me, guys. I've had a little bit of something in my throat most of the day today, so I might be doing that a couple times throughout this podcast. But I've done pretty good at not doing it so far. So let's see if we can keep it going. Let's see. There are certain trees that you don't want to use. You don't want to use cedar. You don't want to use black locust. You don't want to use black walnut, and you don't want to use black cherry. Why don't you want to use these? Because they have they have an antifungal agent in them that's the reason why these trees do so well and they last for so long. They make great fence posts and things like this. So you don't want to use these in your Hugelkultur mound because they have antifungal properties. So you don't want to use that because it's not going to break down, for one, and two, it's going to do the opposite of what you're trying to do. The fungus is the key, okay? There's a lot more stuff. I mean, like I said, it acts as a sponge and it helps you retain all the water that falls onto your property. It sucks up all that water and then gives that to the plants. But part of what does that is that fungal layer, and that fungal layer also provides a lot more stuff. There's an exchange between this fungus and the roots of the plants that allow both of them to live symbiotically so that they can exchange nutrients between each other. So I think that the fungal layer is the key in the hugel bed and what makes it so good. This fungal layer is almost like a crusty white gold, okay? Now you do want to you can use alders, you can use apple, you can use cottonwood, you got other hardwoods like oak, poplar, birch, and you can do willow. These are all really good trees for Hugelkultur. The way that they release the nitrogen over the decomposition period and stuff like that, they work really well. So let me repeat that. That's, if you're writing this stuff down, it's alders, applewood, cottonwood, oak, poplar, willow, and birch. Now, you don't have to write all this stuff down because you can go to theprepperpodcast.com/024. And I'm sorry that it took so long. I had to scroll up in my show notes and get to what number it was. So this is episode 24. So you can either go there and search on the search bar for episode 24, or you can just type in theprepperpodcast.com/024. All right, so these trees, they are made of a lot of carbon. All right, this is what makes the fire and everything work so well. So we're going to talk about wood being carbon now. Carbon, it seems to a lot of people, will rob nitrogen from the soil. So you're going to fill your hugel mound with nitrogen-rich materials. So you've dumped this wood into this hole. That's the first thing that you've done. So now you've got it's not going to rob nitrogen. Okay, let me get this out of the way first before we move on. A lot of people think that if you put wood in there, you're going to find this on a lot of things where they say the wood will rob nitrogen from the soil, and that's not true. Think of the wood as a battery. It's a nitrogen battery. What it's going to do is it's going to charge itself up. And yes, initially it's going to suck nitrogen from the soil, but then once it starts decomposing more, it's going to release all the nitrogen that it sucked up. So what you want to do is you want to fill this hole with nitrogen-rich material as you're building this mound up, because that nitrogen-rich material can offer the wood that's decomposing, it can offer the nitrogen that it needs for the decomposition process. And when that happens, all of that nitrogen is going to be released through a time-released format almost to the plants. So the first year, you're not going to have a lot of nitrogen. I will tell you that our cucumbers did very, very well, although I wasn't sure that they were going to. So the first year, our cucumbers did very well when we did a hugel bed. But a lot of people want to just use beans or something. A legume. So go online and search legume and see what plants you can what plants are legumes. And a lot of times the legumes are going to do really well because what they're going to do is they're going to release nitrogen. That's part of what a legume is. It's a nitrogen fixer. So it's going to release that nitrogen into the soil, and then that wood can suck up that nitrogen. And then later, whenever you have other plants in that bed, that nitrogen is going to be released to those plants. Second and third year probably is when you're going to do that. People have usually what you do is you throw green matter and stuff like that. That's a nitrogen thing. If you throw a bunch of green matter in there, as it decomposes, it will release nitrogen. That's things like grass and straw and compost. Other people have peed on it. I know it sounds weird, but urine has a lot of nitrogen. Now, the problem with adding urine is it has a lot of salt as well, and the salt's not good. So you can actually over-salt the land, and nothing's going to grow there. Think about the Dead Sea and stuff like that. That happened. Even salt plants couldn't live in the Dead Sea because it was so salty, all right? Nothing could live there because there was too much salt. So you think that plants that can't handle salt water are going to do well if you over-salt your land? I mean, there are a lot of properties that have succumbed to desertification because they were over-salted, all right? There are a lot of old like ocean beds and stuff like that are now just desert, and not because of the climate, but because there's so much salt in the ground still. So we can counteract the robbing, the quote unquote robbing of nitrogen by adding a lot of this green matter to our bed. So after you put the wood in there, let's go ahead and add a bunch of green material and compost and stuff like that on top of the wood. Add a couple inches of straw, then a couple inches of compost, and you're going to add, not only is it going to give you nitrogen, but it's going to add organisms that break the wood down. It's just from the breaking down of this green material, it's going to add more organisms that breaks the wood down. So this stuff will do it all by itself. All you have to do is throw this crap in a hole, and it's going to take care of it. Now, if you don't want to let nature do its job and you want to kind of move things along a little quicker, you have hardwood in there, but you want it to go quick, kind of like, in the very beginning, you just want it to get decomposed and you just want the soil rich, then a lot of people will add an optional fungal inoculant. You can just spray it on the bed for like quick start for a good fungus, and it's going to get you the white latticey stuff. This believe it, you'd be surprised. It's miles and miles and miles of this white fungus underneath healthy soil. Just a small amount of healthy soil, it's going to have miles of this stuff, and it's really, really good for the soil. And it gives you good organic matter. I mean, if you throw good organic matter inside this thing, it's going to do the fungus by itself. But I know a lot of people use a fungal inoculant, and if you're using a good organic fungal inoculant, I don't have a problem with you doing that. There's nothing wrong with that. It's actually a good addition if you want to get the decay process happening quicker. After you've added your nitrogen / compost layer, and then you've added your optional fungal inoculate, then you're going to add a layer of dirt. Okay, all the dirt from what you dug out. Like you dug this hole and you've got a bunch of dirt on the side. You're going to put that right back on top. And the thing is you're probably going to need dirt from another location. So be prepared to have to leave and pick up a bunch of dirt and put it on here. We're not worried about tearing up, we're not worried about tearing up the ground and stuff like that. I'm a no-till person, right? But no-till doesn't mean you're not going to tear up the ground occasionally to do something like this, because what we're doing is improving the land. tilling every year in, year out, you're just killing a bunch of stuff with your tiller, and that's why you think that it's a very fertile thing to do. It's not fertile. It just makes weeds stronger. And so, yeah, I'm against tilling every year, but I'm not against one time digging up the dirt, putting a bunch of wood in there, and putting dirt back over top of it, okay? So don't get that mixed up. I am a no-till person. There's nothing wrong with digging into it one time to set up something that's actually going to make the soil and the life that's going to be in the soil stronger and healthier, and what do you know, more resilient. So where was I? I was talking about you're going to put the dirt back on top. Then you're also going to have green matter mixed in with your soil. All right, so the soil that you put in, mix a little green matter in there. And you're going to build to about 5 to 6 feet, okay? The height is optional for everybody, but you're going to go ahead and you're going to build 5 to 6 feet tall, and you're going to have at least a good, I would say if you're going to build an actual Hugelkultur bed, let's get at least a foot of dirt on top of this stuff, at least a foot of actual dirt, but you're going to build it up to at least 5 or 6 feet if you're doing an actual hugel mound, okay? You're going to mulch the top. I would throw a bunch of straw and grass on first, a lot of green material on top of the mound, and then throw wood on top of that, wood chips and stuff like that, like a 3 to 4 inch layer of wood chips on top of that, to act as a nice mulch and keep weeds out of it. It's going to hold more water. I mean, you're going to supercharge the process by doing this. So it'll take care of weeds and give you a lot more water. Now these beds, whenever when they start decomposing, like I said, they're going to create this fungal layer, but it's also going to make it's also going to be like a sponge. It's going to suck up the water, and although it's sucking the water up from around it into underneath the bed, it also does release the water up into the plant root system, okay? So it's like a natural siphon, so to speak, because these plants are already pulling water from the ground, and their pulling water from the ground will act as the siphon, and it will actually bring water down into the mound and back up the mound up to the plants. That is how you can do a raised bed with plants, because they create a natural siphon. All right. More decomposition as this thing decomposes more. How about that? As it decomposes more, it's going to hold more and more water. This fungal layer holds a lot of water. All right. It also will create heat in this bed. There's something very important there. You create heat in a bed where plants are, and what are you doing? Well, if it's hot outside, you're probably going to cause problems with these plants a little bit. So you're going to want some hardier plants in there when it's really hot outside. But the decomposition process will actually extend your growing season, because you've got this warm soil on the plants. So, if you've got like a slight freeze coming on or something like that, then you could just throw some plastic or something over top of these plants, and the soil is going to keep them warm as it is. So that's pretty cool. Is you can actually extend your growing season by a few weeks in either direction by the decomposition process in a hugel mound. All right, now I'm going to just go ahead. All I was meaning to talk about today was the actual hugel mounds, but I'm going to tell you that I did a smaller version of this in a backyard. All right, you can dig a shorter and skinnier hole. You can dig it. You don't have to dig it as far down. You can put a little less wood in it, and you can basically build up kind of a mound-shaped raised bed. And this is what I call on my blog the hybrid hugel method. All it is creating a raised bed out of the hugel method. But you're building it the exact same way. You're just doing it a lot smaller. You're only going to dig about a foot down. Then you're going to put wood in it about ground level. And then you're going to cover it up with a bunch of nitrogen stuff. And then you're going to put your layer of dirt on it. And then you're going to put more nitrogen on top of that layer of dirt. And then you're going to do your compost. And by the time you're done, you will be about 1 foot elevated above the ground. And you have a mini hugel bed. If you do this on contour, you will suck tons of water out from every rainfall. You will suck every bit of that. Now, if you have this in a wet area, then you do not want to do this on contour, because you can create a wetland by doing enough of these in a fairly high rainfall and a wet area in your yard. So if you're going to do these raised beds like this, and we're not talking putting edging around it. You could put edging around it if you wanted to, but you don't have to. Just mound it up. And if you do this on contour, just think you're going to get probably 25% to half, 25% to 50% more water into your soil. So if you've already got wet soil there and plants will grow well, then you may not want to do this bed on contour. If you do this on contour, you can create a wetland. You don't want to do that, all right, because then it will change. I mean, you may want to do that. You may actually be designing a wetland for other purposes, but we're talking about gardening here, typical gardening. You're probably not going to want to create a wetland. Well, that's everything about Hugelkultur that I was planning on talking about today. So remember, this is episode 24. And go check out my calendar at theprepperpodcast.com/calendar. Remember, I got this budget coming out, and I haven't settled on a price yet. But I promise you guys, I will give anyone who I will set up when I have it available. I will set up for you to use a code, and I will give you the code over my podcast. If you are a podcast listener, a podcast subscriber, then you will get this code, and it will give you, I don't know, probably 10 to 20% off of the price of this budget. Everybody else will have to pay full price. Yeah, so there will be other ways for people to get a couple codes.